Our speakers, they just dropped a lot of knowledge and a lot of information for us to reflect on personally, definitely. So now we'll open it up to questions, inshallah. So, sister? Do we have a microphone? That's the one.
We can repeat the question if they ask it.
Okay. Do you want to just stand up and...
Assalamualaikum. Ramsia and Brother Hassan. Within a short time, both of you have very articulated, very important points. Thank you for that. Actually, I don't have the question, but like from your insight, I got the impression that you put on to us that why I felt like why the America is superpower now, because it has gave the so much ground to be in that position, because the civil rights, every struggle America has gone through, it made us some laws and everything which brought us to be superpower, which other even Muslim countries is lack of. So I'm really proud of to be a Muslim American.
There's no doubt, I think, that as long as America remains strong and committed to civil rights, it will be a strong nation. And when it undermines its own liberties and freedoms, and as we see unfortunately happen in the Patriot Act, in the National Defense Authorization Act, then we'll see it getting weaker. So if we want America to remain a strong and free and just nation, we have to uphold civil rights. As long as America is just, it will be a great nation. And it's our duty to make sure it stays our great nation, because it is our home. And if we will not be free in America, where else will we be free?
And it's not our ability just to fight for our rights. And I think as Muslim Americans, sometimes we just want to defend our issues, this is about me. But one thing that we've realized in Tennessee, and I've said this repeatedly in numerous events that I've been to, I fight for the rights of those who want to take away my rights. Because that is the beauty of America that's not granted anywhere else. And we have to remember that we have to step out of our comfort zone and say, it's about me a little bit, but at the end of the day, this is greater than all of us. This is not just about my community, but it's about the next community and the community after that. And when do we end this vicious cycle?
I think we can repeat the question if you ask it.
I can speak loud enough. Assalamu alaikum. At ISNA conference, I had a chance to see meet Imam Khalid Griggs in North Carolina, and he said that the anti-Sharia effort just swooped in on North Carolina and came before they even saw it. My question is now with your experience, have you been able to work with other Muslim communities to see the light, see what's coming before it hits them, or help them to address it once it gets there, like what's happened in North Carolina, for instance?
Yeah, great question. Alhamdulillah, yes. So when we had our anti-Sharia bill in 2010, we had the most dangerous version. Traditionally, the way the bill was written that they would ban foreign law. Any law from another country would be banned in the U.S. and the Constitution would be upheld. And I mean, anyone in their right mind, we know the Constitution is going to precede any other law. And so in 2009 in Tennessee, they passed the ban on foreign law. Off the radar, last minute, no word. We were so busy fighting immigration bills that we didn't even realize them passing it. It just literally passed overnight unanimously. So when that passed, they found that, oh wow, we passed this really quickly. Now let's put some teeth to it. Our intent is not foreign law. Our intent is anti-Sharia, anti-Muslim legislation. So they thought they could do the same with anti-Sharia. So when they brought the bill down, we were in the middle of our organizing, and fortunately we had some folks from Florida who actually joined in on every single one of our calls and took notes and said, we know you guys are going through this. We're pretty sure we're going to face this. And the beauty of what happened in Tennessee is not only did the Muslim community in Tennessee organize, not only did we have like a strategy in place, but we had folks from like Florida involved, but we also had national Muslim organizations, various Muslim organizations who stepped in to give us advice and support. And for example, CAIR was our lead partner in there. ACLU was our lead partner. So all these groups worked together. So when this was presented in other states, they used Tennessee as an example. And this is true, you know, Alabama was going through something similar, Georgia was going through something similar, Florida had its numerous attempts, North Carolina. And so it was not only us working with some of these groups, but our national partners, because we were still ingrained in the battles in Tennessee. You have to understand, in Tennessee for the past several years, it's onslaught of attacks every month. Like every month we have a different issue. So when we weren't able to strategically help our counterparts across the U.S., our national partners helped step in, and we were actually able to give them a training toolkit. I have a PowerPoint that kind of condenses what we did in Tennessee that I share with whoever asks. And we will gladly give that to anyone else who needs a copy of that, who wants to know kind of what we did in Tennessee.
One of the critical things is we have to be proactively organized, and that's the problem. We find the anti-American, anti-Sharia legislation that's sweeping the nation is really gaining strong footholds in communities and states where the Muslim community is not properly organized, and we're being too reactive, and that's unacceptable. Unfortunately, as a community, we expect to get the most for the least. That's why our civil rights organizations are underfunded, undersupported. We expect people to give up their families, give up lucrative careers, and dedicate their whole, give up their sanity to work day and night to defend our rights with minimum community support, and that's unacceptable. You know, and that's why they're gaining success. But in the organizations, in places where there's a strong community presence, like in Ramzia's community or in Florida, or where there's strong CAIR presence, we're able to defeat it because we're proactively organized. So we have to start thinking that, look, we need to invest in our civil rights. We can have our masajid, our Islamic schools, our businesses, but if you don't have organizations like Ramzia's or CAIR's that are defending these institutions, they're all for nothing. One law could demolish them and destroy them all. Like the anti-Sharia bill they tried to pass in Tennessee, making practicing Islam punishable by 20 years in jail. I mean, so we need to start investing, and I think we need to start here with CAIR Arizona. MashaAllah, CAIR Arizona right now has 1 part-time employee. It needs to have 10 employees, 5 attorneys. Who's going to defend our rights if we don't stand up for ourselves?
Yes.
Brother Hassan, can you give me the name of the book that you were referring to?
The one where I read the quote from?
Yes.
Islamophobia and the Politics of Empire by Deepak Kumar. In fact, I have it. I can show it to you after the talk.
Say that one more time.
Islamophobia and the Politics of Empire. And there's a few really, really good books that we should all be familiar with. Another is The Missing Martyrs, Why There Are So Few Muslim Terrorists. And many others, mashallah. If you're interested, I'll give you my card and email you my reading list.
I just want to make a comment. I mean, I've heard numerous students today say that, you know, we need to start building coalitions and working with other organizations, other groups. I feel like the nation has a trend where we're going towards, oh, racism is over. The recent decision by the Supreme Court for the Voting Rights Act, where they removed, I can't remember the section, but basically the national government is no longer responsible for reviewing the districts in specifically the southern states. So in the next couple of years, we're going to have a lot of cases coming up for a lot of different groups that are going to be fighting their own battles. And I think what you're saying, I just want to reiterate that we really, really need to start focusing on working with other organizations as well. It's not just about Islamophobia; it's also about African American rights when they're voting, specifically the Latino community, etc.
Exactly. So I'd love to give this example from Tennessee during the anti-Sharia because I was blown away. So when we had the anti-Sharia bill, we did lists of coalitions, faith leaders, businesses, all that great stuff. But the one group that surprised us and actually made a difference was the Tea Party. The Tea Party, especially from one region of the state, issued a press release condemning the anti-Sharia bill. Not because of Islam and Muslims, let's be very clear, but because it was an excessive government, infringement on personal rights and liberties. And when that press release came out, and it was through an organizer from East Tennessee, I was shocked because Tea Party, Muslims, but alhamdulillah, I mean, that showed we have unlikely allies in different issues, and you have to be able to recognize that. And so in Tennessee, my prior background is actually on immigrant and refugee rights. So I did a lot of issues with immigrants and refugees that many times the Muslim community wasn't involved in. But now that I'm doing Muslim organizing, I ensure that we are fighting for immigrant refugee rights. But the voting issue, for example, has overtaken tendency, and we work with our African American allies on that. When there's events that need to happen, when there's lobbying that have to happen, when there's elected officials that we need to meet, we are right there with them. Because we know it's not just about their community. We know it's about ours as well.
It's very important we stop being emotional and reactive to one of the issues, for example, we faced. We had a Muslim sister who went to buy some pizza from Domino's, and when they gave her like a really garbage pizza, basically, they didn't take care of her, and she said, "Oh, you're discriminating against me. I want to report you to your management." And what they did is they called the police and they said, "We have a woman. She said she's Muslim, and we're American. She's gonna blow us up." And the police went and they 6-7 hours without a warrant wrongfully arrested her, took off her hijab. She was pregnant, threw her in jail, would only give her like pork sandwiches for 2 days. And in fact, when we got her out, we represented her. We got her out of jail the next day, and we got the case dismissed, all for free. All our services are free, and that's important for you to remember. She actually had internal bleeding. She had to go to the hospital as a result of it. And then they put her picture online without hijab. Very humiliating, very difficult situation. And the point is, when we said, all right, everyone, we need to raise funds to help this lady, mashallah, we got like thousands and thousands of dollars in the community, of course. I mean, you're giving up money to protect your sister. But if we went to those masajid a month before and said, give us the resources to challenge the laws and policies and the discrimination and the bigotry that allows that to happen in the first place, we'll be lucky to get a few $100s. So we can't just wait to be reactive. We have to be proactive. The Muslim community was dormant, especially by 2009, 2010, our civil rights organizations were very weak. They were on sick. We thought discrimination was over, Islamophobia was over. And it took the New York City mosque controversy to really wake us up as a community. And now we've seen a very strong emergence, but we can't afford to keep being reactive. We need to be proactive and invest in the civil rights organizations that are going to defend and protect the rights of our children to grow up without fear of intimidation or harassment because they believe in La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah.
We have 2 minutes for a very quick question.
Well, just a quick follow-up statement. As a society, we are not engaged in prevention. When we say be proactive, we talk about being preventive. We move towards dealing with treatment. Now, I'm a social worker, so I'm coming from that treatment. And that's what we tend to do. We tend to address things from a treatment side rather than a prevention side. And until we rely on the law and tie our camel, which is the prevention side, we're not going to have this, and that's the problem. We need to educate folks on the value of prevention and the payback that we get from prevention rather than treatment.
Any last final 1-minute comments?
Just maybe, can you share another case of maybe some issue that happened maybe with some of the youth in the community who dealt with some child abuse? You said that issue about the young man who was told to fornicate with the girls. Just maybe some other cases, just so people can be aware.
There's just so many, but the bottom line is, look, if you face harassment or intimidation or bullying or anything, just call your civil rights officer and we'll guide you through the process. We have free attorneys everywhere. There's so many countless stories, and I think we mentioned some of the worst ones, right? The person who said, look, you either spy on your community, spy on the mosque, spy on the Muslim restaurants, we're going to throw you in jail. You know, that would have never happened if he called his attorney. And what the FBI does, by the way, just so you have peace of mind, they tell you don't need an attorney, you're not in trouble, then they start talking to you, they get you, they make a very different situation for you. But the fact of the matter is, the minute you call your attorney, and your attorney contacts them, they move on. Because they don't want to waste time, they don't have a legitimate reason to talk to you. If they did, they would speak to you even after you get an attorney. But because they don't have a legitimate reason to talk to you, they know they can't get away with anything now they have an attorney. So they move on to the next Muslim who's too foolish to call an attorney. So don't fall into their trap. Protect the 5th Amendment, protect the 6th Amendment, exercise your rights, call an attorney.
Okay, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much to our speakers, Brother Hassan and Sister Ramziya.
Little known fact, Hassan hasn't even had coffee this morning, so, but he has that energy level, mashallah. Give another round of applause for both of our speakers. They will be doing another session after the lunch break, breakout session, so if you enjoyed their talk, they're gonna go more in depth in some of their tactics that they use in terms of, engagement and engaging with elected officials. It's 1 o'clock right now, so it's time for lunch, so And we're also having the Duhur prayer. So Abdullah Ajmeri will come up and he'll do the adhan in this room. But the prayer is going to be in the La Paz room. And there's ushers in the hallway to let you know where the prayer room is as well. So you have an hour if you want to go get a bite to eat as well. Just be back here at 2 because the sessions will start back up at that time, inshallah. So if you enjoyed the first part of the conference, second part is going to be just as good. So we have 2 sessions going on right now, one parallel session in the other room, and then this is the main session. So just briefly, we wanted to get the input of local Muslim leaders as well in this discussion. So defining our identity here in the U.S. is going to be the next topic that we launch here. I'm going to call up Sister Zarina Nadir to be the moderator of this session, so she'll introduce the speakers as well.
Jazakallahu khair. Assalamu alaikum, and may peace be upon you all. It is absolutely my pleasure to be the moderator for this session. We have 2 of our key pillars of the community, of the local community here, and I'm just extremely honored to be able to introduce them and this topic. Those of you who were here for the morning sessions, I'm sure got an eyeful. I know that I was sitting there and just completely feeling how blessed I was to be here. It was extremely informative, and this session is going to be equally as formative, I'm sure. This topic is going to introduce defining our American Muslim identity. And as we turn on the TV and browse through the internet or flip through talk radio, all types of so-called experts are banking off of an industry that attempts to define Islam and Muslims. But how do we as a community take control of that narrative in defining our own identity? This panel will dive into these issues and what promises to be an information and proactive session. So we're definitely going to want some participation from the audience as well. It's my pleasure to introduce the panel. First, we'll have speak Sister Muna Ali, who, as I said, is a pillar of the community. She wears many hijabs, but her latest one is a PhD candidate here at ASU. Her dissertation focuses on identity of young Muslims in America. And as I said, she's been an activist here in our community and someone that we've definitely looked to on the local level as well as the national level for expertise in this particular area. Following Sister Muna Ali, we are going to have the Imam from the Islamic Community Center here in Tempe, actually right across the street, Imam Ahmed Shaqirat. Imam Ahmed has been as well a very big pillar in our community, working in the Dawah sector, working with building bridges between individuals from various religious backgrounds. And actually around 2011, Imam Ahmed and the pastor of the church that is our neighbor of the mosque there received a peace award for building these types of bridges. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to actually turn the microphone over first to Sister Muna Ali, and then we will bring up Imam Ahmed. Thank you very much. Please welcome.
Okay, I need a little IT help. I'm not an Apple person. Oh, never mind. That's it. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon all of you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. The topic of today, this idea of narrative and identities, I thought it would be useful to define some concepts before I dive in, because we all seem to use those terms as though we all have a clear understanding what they mean. So what is narrative and what is identity? When we talk about identity, it's often talked about as if it's something we possess. My identity, as though it's a product, it's a state of being. Where actually in reality, identity is a process of becoming. We are constantly becoming someone that we want to be. And identity is a process that is defined in dialogue with another. That other being family members, our fellow citizens, our people from our own faith. So it's not a finished product. We don't own an identity, and the public may define it. Your family may think of you as in a particular way. Your children may think of you in a particular way, and you may think of yourself in a particular way. So where those three intersect is where this identity is forming, and it's a continuous process of becoming rather than a finished product or a state of being. Narrative, we also think of it, we use it as if we know what it is, and we kind of have a sense, intuitive sense of what it is, but linguists define narrative as sort of a structure upon which different stories are woven. And so, for example, a dominant narrative about Islam might be that Islam is a violent religion. Muslims have their own other dominant narrative. Islam is a religion of peace, and those two narratives are in dialogue with each other. So how do we change the narrative? Because the narratives that are out there defining Muslims these days are one that makes us feel like we are under siege, that we can't say who we are, can't define and speak for ourselves. So Muslims are terrorists, they're extremists, they are misogynists, women are oppressed. Those are the narratives against which we're constantly working. And we're posed with questions: are you first Muslim or are you first American? Which one are you first? And those questions are problematic because, again, they assume that identity is a product. Which one are you first? And inherent in that question is a divided loyalty. Because if you're a Muslim first, you really can't be a true American. And if you're American first, then you have to be kind of a Muslim light, because you can't be both. Those are the narratives and the underlying assumptions. So American Muslims are unique among Americans, and we're unique also among the Muslim Ummah, in that we are diverse ethnically. The immigrants among us represent 80 countries, and it's one of the few places also where there is a huge native community, converts, and who are now in their third and fourth generation. We're also unique in that we have all the different sects, all the different groups, the sectarian groups, and political and religious leanings. So that makes us unique, and with that diversity comes a lot of challenges as well as a lot of opportunities. So we may feel like we are under siege and floundering and not know how to, speak back to Muslim extremists and to American extremists who define us and box us in a particular way. And as we get frustrated and feel sometimes, you watch the news and you're disheartened by what you're seeing, we need to remember. We need to think back of our own religious tradition, and that it's only through tribulation that true transformation occurs. That we did not, if you go back to Islamic history, Islam had a very difficult birth. And America had a very difficult birth. So if we're the inheritors of these three heritages, what makes us think that we're going to have it easy? So this is the spiritual and the civic work that we have to do as a community. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran reminds us, أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم فليعلمن الله الذين صدقوا وليعلمن الكاذبين. Do people think that they can just say we believe and be left untested? So if that is the essence, the source of our faith, this is part of our textual tradition as well as the life story of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We cannot despair. Despair is not part of our vocabulary, it's not part of our religious history. We know it's going to be a difficult birth, but there will be a birth. Now, it took me, I did my dissertation on American Muslim identity, civic engagement, community building, cultural citizenship, And I use the idea of a narrative to tie it all together, because and the population I studied are young generation. Those young range in age from 18 to 55. So that's So they, as long as they were the children of immigrants and the children of converts. So because it took me 400 pages and over 150,000 words to talk about this topic, I decided that perhaps a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I'm doing the rest of my presentation as PowerPoint, inshallah. So these are the narratives against which we are working. The Islamophobia, the terrorists, our men are terrorists, our women are oppressed, right? Those are, if we sum them up. And the way you change the narrative is by telling our stories, the story of us. And I underline us because us is very expansive, and you can define it into concentric circles. So the us, me first as an individual, my family, my local Muslim community, my local community of Arizona, and the American community, and so on. And so we are speaking back. Even though as you watch TV you may get disheartened, we are speaking back. So how do we change, how do we tell the story of us? The issues that I look into, and we can talk about this in more details because 20 minutes, or actually now 10 minutes, does not really allow enough time to elaborate. But I summed them up to the first and foremost, we need to build our own community. Because as long as we are divided across ethnic, gender, sectarian lines, we will not be a cohesive group who can speak back. America has been unique in the sense that every group that came has been put through the mill and came out as a community. So we have the Irish, where when they were back home, they were different groups. There were the African American, all these tribes from Africa that were brought here, where all of a sudden became one people. So now we have to become one people, the Muslim American community. And in order to do that, there's some serious talk that we need to have, and serious soul searching, because there is a lot of angst and hurt within our groups. There is a big divide within the Muslim community between immigrants and indigenous. The very terms themselves are problematic, and I put them in quotation, because how long do you have to be an immigrant? How many generations can you be here before you're an immigrant? But they reflect a particular heritage, and this angst have to do with how the baggage that we brought as converts and as immigrants, and how that baggage interfaced. And I can go further into it. But our scholars have talked a lot about that, and Sherman Jackson has wrote about that in his book. But basically, there is a divide in the community, and there is a religious authority that this affects. So there is a sense of racism, there is a sense of disrespect, and then that's how the indigenous Muslims feel, that they forever have to prove that they are real Muslims. When did you convert is the question that always comes up, even though their grandparents might have been Muslim. The immigrants, on the other hand, encounter another version of that. So they may be here for generations, and where are you from? That's the eternal, the overarching question. Then we need to build bridges across across sectarians. I mean, when you're a Muslim, the average American Joe does not care if you're a Shia, if you're a Sunni, if you're a Sufi. To them, you're a Muslim and you represent a problem. And I'm not saying every American, I'm saying those who are bent on framing us in a particular way. Because the majority of our fellow citizens, they want to know. They don't really know us, and that's part of our fault. Then we need to know and claim our history. Just like every new Muslim claims all the Islamic history from, Quraysh through all the different stages of our Islamic history, American Muslims need to reclaim their history in America. And that did not start in 1960. Because if you think it started and often we talk about it in our conferences, we are a new community. No, we're not, unless you're thinking that my people came in 1960. But my people did not come in 1960. The Muslims that I link to have been here for centuries. And that's what we need to tap into, and we need to know our history. We need to teach that in our Islamic school. Why is it that we're teaching what the Sahaba did and stop there? Why are we not teaching how 1/10 of the slaves that came to this country were Muslims? Why are we not teaching that the first text in African American literature is a text by an African American Muslim slave who was literate in Arabic and wrote his biography? So we need to reclaim that. Then we need to carry on the civil rights movement. So interactions within the community, this is some of the things that I found in my research, and granted it was a small group. Nevertheless, it reflects some of the sentiments that we pray together and then we go to our own places and hang with our own ethnic groups, that we hardly socialize together, work less even together, and that, a quarter think that we have no contact with each other between immigrants and converts. We also, 66% think relationships are good, and they base that on the one African American or one, Caucasian American that they know. But the relationship needs a lot of work. Then we need to continue the civil rights movement, because that is part of our history. We all, whether we are women, African American, people of color, Muslims, we stand on the shoulders of the people that gave life, liberty, and limb for through the civil rights movement. So we need to reclaim that as our own heritage and do our part, because the only way to be American is not to say I'm American, is to pay your dues, and paying your due involves doing the work that needs to be done, and that is through the civil rights movement. And here I'm capturing some of the things that a lot of the second generation, a lot of times we talk about our young people have identity crisis. They are, disengaged from masajid. They may be disengaged from masajid because we're boring them to death. However, they are working and they're doing a lot of things outside of the masjid. If the masjid leadership is enlightened, they pull them in and they have them do the work within the masjid and expand from there. But oftentimes there are so many politics within the masjid that they're working outside. Also, one of the issues that have divided the community is that a lot of immigrants, they came here and they kind of, America is racially divided, right? There's black, white. Native Americans are completely left out of the story, but black and white. So new immigrants kind of line themselves up with the white side of the equation, leaving the African, distancing themselves from the African American. And a lot of Arabs and some South Asians and also Iranians, they're legally white. So then it was, why would you not think you're white? Physically you look white and you're legally white, but they're socially not white. And second generations are realizing that because they go to school and they're looked at as brown. They're not seen as white. So there is this movement in California that said, check it right, you're not white. This was the 2010 census because they wanted to create a category that says their ethnic group, because when you count, then you can fight for your rights. But also, a lot of times, as long as it's not our issue, we sit back. So we're not part of the immigration reform discussion. We're not part of the dream, the fight for the dream movement. But there are some Muslims that are part of that. So there are young Muslims that are part of the Dream Defenders, a movement that started in California. Over there in Chicago, they are standing up with the Latino community. So through it all, we need to be carrying that movement, the civil rights movement, because it's what got us here. It's why we are here today, able to speak at a university, wearing the way some of us are dressed, and saying what we're saying. So we need to acknowledge, pay our dues, and carry on the dream. Then we need to have creative solutions to crisis. It's one thing to always be holding press conference and saying, that is not who I am. That's not who Muslims are. We are not that. It's a whole other story to say this is who we are. So for example, our terminologies are hijacked, right? Jihad equals holy war. Well, some young people are redefining and reclaiming this terminology. And so there is a campaign that started in Chicago that's called My Jihad. And you just send your picture and a caption of what is your jihad. So for example, there's young people on the side there, they say, my jihad is to build friendship across the aisle. So the woman is talking to a Christian, and the gentleman is next to a Jewish gentleman. They remember the bus ads, the Islamophobic bus ads? We could argue and fight, but that's freedom of expression. So you use that freedom of expression. So they had our own bus posters. Remember when NPR speaker, okay, I'll go through past. Remember when NPR speaker said he's afraid of Muslims and their garb? Well, while everyone was debating, should he have said that when he was fired, did he have freedom of speech? A creative young Muslim came up with the idea of Muslims and their garb. So how do you deconstruct that narrative visually? What do Muslims wear? So she created this blog, which, by the way, made national news. Both the banner earlier with the bus thing, the campaign My Jihad, and this have made national news. So has, remember, every so often there's a news item about the Prophet and denigrating his story. So this young, he's from Tennessee, came up with this campaign, Celebrate Mercy, and many of you probably have heard. When the ambassador was killed in Libya, he took it upon himself to generate 5,000 email messages, Muslim messages to the family. It went viral. They stopped at 7,000, met with the family, and it made international news. So this is how we are changing the narrative instead of just going on the usual way of fighting for our rights. Don't get me wrong, that needs to continue also, but we need to come up with creative ways. Then we serve, we have to be contributing. What is our contribution? We do social justice work, we do, we serve the poor, and do creative ways, do it in creative ways, and show our faith in action. It's one thing to say Islam is about serving, but going out there in the inner city and doing the work speaks volumes. Then we have, and it doesn't have to be just standing in a food bank and serving. It could be through creative ways. Then we also have cultural products, and that is what Americans of each group have done. They contributed through music and comedy and film and literature, and I will go very quickly through these without speaking too much because I'm hoping pictures will say it up, and then we can discuss a little bit more. So we have a very long and deep history in American music across all genres, all styles. So in hip hop, punk and country Muslim, are those contradictions in terms? You think about it. We have comedy, and these guys are doing more work than many academics are doing. We can go and talk to lecturers, it's a self-selected group. Comedy gets on TV and it's entering every house. Then we have this whole new literature that many of us don't even know about. And that includes nonfiction, where we're speaking for ourselves, men and women narratives. We have female fiction authors. We have male fiction authors, and a lot of these are making, New York bestsellers. Oprah's book of the month, one of the best books. So these are the things that we have to educate ourselves about. And young children literature and plays. And then we have to define what we're doing. All these people are doing all this work, what are we doing? Individually and collectively. And inshallah we can carry on the conversation during the Q&A.
And I can't wait for your dissertation to come out, inshallah, published. It was phenomenal. All right, next up we have Imam Ahmed Shafirat, again the Imam from the Islamic Community Center. Imam Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I can use Sister Muna's picture, I'm fine with that. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Thank you very much for attending and for the invitation and for organizing this. I believe it's a step on the right direction to open file and to speak different file, to open all different files and to speak and touching the sensitive issues we are facing as American Muslims. I will start with the same point Sister Muna started with, which is identifying ourselves as American Muslims. So when we take the first word, American, it has its own definition. When we say Muslims, it has another definition. And we can add a third word of ethnical issue for somebody who is American Muslim, Arab, or Indian, or Pakistani, or Asian, or Jordanian, whatever, where I believe there is no conflict between these issues. You can be an American, you can be a Muslim, and you can be an Arab, or an Indian, or a Pakistani, which means three different dimensions we relate ourselves to. Keep in mind when we say Americans, not all Americans have the same color or the same view. The same. When we say Muslims, not all Muslims have the same view or the same color. When we say also any ethnicity does not mean the same views or the same. So we have this issue like the way America was established by immigrants. Till now we have, I think the last survey I got, 72% of Muslims in America have immigrant background. And to understand the background these immigrant Muslims came from countries of dictatorship, aggression, injustice, and poverty were main reasons pushing these individuals and these Muslims to migrate to America. Maybe you do not pay a lot of attention that the story of Pharaoh Fir'aun is the longest and the most repeated in the Quran. But for immigrant Muslims who came from third world countries, this means a lot, because every description you read in the Quran about Pharaoh is applied to the rulers of that regime they came from, which shaped really their personality and led us to some complication and some characteristics that we need to work to free ourselves from. I'll give you some examples. Number one, the issue of confusing something called success with victory, where we, because of the pressure of the oppression, we look for the victory. I look to reserve this place, whether I can manage it or not, whether I can lead it to success or not. Take an example to apply this in our messages. My achievement is I reserve this position. I want this seat, so I'm keeping it. Whether I can manage this organization to succeed or not. So confusing this issue, there is a difference between being victorious does not mean that you are successful. And being successful does not mean for necessity you have to be victorious. On the international level, they give an example of Japan, which was defeated in the World War II, but it is a very successful country without being a victorious before. Now, to try to touch other points to follow up with, to continue where Sister Muna started, we have to criticize ourselves as American Muslims. I believe because of this background, we have a weak intra-faith dialogue. We lack the ability to freely open all the files, to talk to each other as Muslims, to have better identification for ourselves. This led to being illiterate in many of the sensitive modern issues. Take, for example, the issue of secularism or separation of church and state. How many of us really can stand up for 5-10 minutes among the Muslims and to really have an authentic, a clear stand, attitude, a view of this issue? We left it for others to criticize us, attack us, identify us, and telling us what our attitude as Muslims towards secularism or separation of church and state. We were not the ones who discussed this issue and who came up with a proposal. To give you an example, one of the most renowned scholars in America from an immigrant background authored a book was saying, oh, secularism is kufr, is disbelief. And wow, this is, in one statement, this big scholar, with respect to all his knowledge, he does not know what he is talking about. Does not know what he is talking about. Why? Because of the background that hunted him down in just taking a tag or a term and putting it down because does not have the word Islam in it. Having this issue, this understanding, this generalization is hurting us, is not advancing us and our Muslim community. Keep in mind, when you talk secularism, there is no one secularism in the world. There is the European form of secularism, there is the Middle Eastern form of secularism, which this scholar is talking about, which is really represent all kind of aggression and anti-religion. You remember the former Turkish form of secularism before Erdogan, where a person will be arrested in the street if he is wearing a hat or she is wearing a hijab. Even a Jewish person will be arrested in the street if he is wearing the David Star, and they call this secularism. They call this separation of church and the state. And if you remember Mona Gauji, who was elected to the parliament, and she was kicked out by the other parliament because she insisted to keep the head cover. They call this secularism. Oh yeah, this is anti-Islam, this is anti-freedom, this is anti-humanity. But you are not talking about all secularism. No, you specify yourself in this issue, because these modern terms, secularism, etc., they need to be analyzed, separated, broke down into many aspects. The extreme majority of them have no problem with the teaching of Islam, and we as Muslims can help them. Take another example, the issue of the relation with history, where we have been accused that you Muslims, if you have power, you're going to repeat history. We say no, we want to learn from history. We will never repeat history, but honestly, some Muslims, what they think of when they think of Islam being up and I have the power, they want to repeat history. I give you an example. In Jordan, some of the very fanatic Orthodox Muslims, they were demonstrating against the government carrying swords and knives. And they call it Ghazwat Badr. They call their demonstration Ghazwat Badr, the Battle of Badr, and was against a police station. Subhanallah, yeah, some Muslims will want to repeat history. We Muslims need to address this issue. We respect our history, we honor the Sahaba, we honor the Tabi'een, we are proud of that. But look, our history is a history, is the attraction and the contribution of the humans who did right and who did wrong. So we never copy any history. Islam does not require from us to copy a history, but yeah, we learn from the past to plan for our future. Take the issue of the status of non-Muslim in the Muslim society. How can we coexist with others? Also, Muslims have very little, I'm talking about the average public of the Muslim community. We don't think, we think, people of scripture, they are Jews and the Christians. When they ask about, how about pagans, how about atheists, how about this and that, we pause. So, no, even in our Islamic scholars' views and the school of thought, we have way wider and more accommodation than to summarize the issue in this, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La ikraha fi din. Another example, take the issue of value of democracy versus shura. Is there in Islam a political system? Some Muslims will come to imagine, look, brothers and sisters, the Quran will not come, take your hand and my hand to show me how to cross the street. So some Muslims have in their mind to accept the traffic lights you need to show me something from the Quran and from the Sunnah. This is not the right way to understand Islam, and we need to publicize this criticism to some really poisoned ideas that are sitting there in the mind of some of our generation. The gradual development of any society where we integrate our views as Muslims to gradually build or move toward what we believe to be better and closer to Islam. The issue of abrogation in the Quran. The hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, Sahih Bukhari, there is a nice hadith that she said, when the Quran first revealed in Mecca, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the good manners and the good faith and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah did not talk about the prohibition of alcohol or adultery, because if Allah started by telling them, do not do this, don't do this, they will say, hey, we cannot give up this. This has been our culture for generations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delayed that. The Almighty established the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, the love of this faith, the loyalty to this faith and to these values. Then the Almighty started telling, okay, the Almighty Allah wants you to give up this. They said, oh, we listen and we obey. There is another really good example, if I have time. The Prophet ﷺ, after even the conquest of Mecca, he looked at, he said to Aisha, had you people not new to Islam, I would knock the building, the construction of the Kaaba down and rebuild it according to the foundation of our father, Prophet Ibrahim. Because when Ibrahim alayhi salam built the Kaaba, it was not in this shape. It was longer than this, a rectangle more than a cube. And if you go to the Kaaba now, you see that curve, okay? That is, there was a flood before Islam, the pre-Islamic history, and they could not, that knocked the Kaaba down, destroyed the Kaaba, and when they built it, these people before Islam, the tribe of Muhammad ﷺ, they could not find enough stones, so they got short, and to remark the Kaaba, they put that curve. The Kaaba used to have 2 doors attached to the ground. So a pilgrim would come, enter from one, visit, and go exit from the other one. Because of the racial society, and the slaves, and the noble, and the masters, so when these Quraysh, before Islam, built the Kaaba, they made it one door, and they made it high, the key with somebody. So they will open to the masters and the noble, and they will exclude the slaves and the public. So they made the Kaaba for their own, okay? So the Prophet ﷺ said, I would knock it down and rebuild it according to the foundation of Ibrahim ﷺ, and make 2 doors attached to the ground, so everybody can access it, come from here, visit, pray, and exit from there. And the Prophet ﷺ knew this is the right thing to do, but he did not apply it, because of the ground was not prepared for that. He thought this will create a chaos, so he would wait on doing that. And the Prophet ﷺ died, passed away before even applying this his idea, which he believed to be right. So the issue here is, if you need to work with others, we need to learn to compromise. As a Muslim, my view is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but if I can get 1, I'm happy. Maybe later I can convince you with number 2, with number 3, and so on. This gradual development, even though it's in the heart of the Quran, the heart of Islam and the Sunnah, I do not see it applied in our practical, in our practice more, a lot. I can take another example, the humane and international laws and values, the United Nations Human Rights Declaration, the international courts, where we Muslims stand from this, and how much awareness we have about this. If we want really to be recognized by others and to have better identification by others, by our opponents, we need really to present ourselves and to be well educated about this issue. Brothers and sisters, the medieval societies, history and the Crusades, etc., killed something called trust between the Muslim world and the West, between East and West. And they talk a lot about a clash of civilizations, etc. So now, our opponents the Islamophobes, the Zionists, whatever you want to call them, they try to present us like this. Look, political Islam leads to militant Islam, which is violent extremism. And Islamic State, as somebody said, I'm quoting him, Islamic State is a threat to the universal peace and to the secularism anywhere. And unfortunately, some Muslim individuals will give the proof of this and will even declare this and confirm this, which I believe is not true. Is the Quran a source of law or the source of law? You know, we Muslims and some Muslim speakers, emotional speakers, Quran must be the source of law. I don't see any problem that Islam is a source of law. Again, do not expect the Quran to tell you every single step you need to use with our logic, our experience, our human sense, what works, what does not work, in order to manage or under the guidance of the Quran and the themes of the Quran. So I want to say this: we Muslims want to be governed by reason, based on the themes of the guidance of Allah. Do not repeat this. No, we need to be governed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by the Quran. No, we govern, we look at what the Prophet ﷺ did, what Umar al-Khattab did, what Abu Bakr did, what Umar, what Uthman, what Ali did. They adopted many of the aspects of non-Muslim societies when they found they work for them. So what is being proved to be beneficial and useful and work, nothing wrong in Islam. We can accept it, we can integrate it, and we can use it, and we can claim it. As the mere rule the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-hikmah dalat al-mu'min. Wisdom, what is good, is the target of a believer. Wherever you find it, you claim it, take it, use it, and benefit from it, regardless where it was made of, who was the first one to initiate it, etc. Now, I will conclude with this. Here is how they try to, our opponents try to identify us and our vision and our political Islam and our Islamic State the way we envision. Like number one, it will be controlled by clergy, will have no freedom, will not tolerate minorities, and will have army of horses and soldiers carrying swords, okay, and will declare jihad against everybody else to kill them for no reason. This is how the media, the Islamophobes, and unfortunately some ignorant, extremist Muslims also are claiming and confirming. Now, I believe, according to the Quran and the Sunnah, here is a virtual guidelines. Here's the guidelines for some virtual Islamic state or Islamic identity in the political field we Muslims can claim. Number one, I believe it will learn from history but will not repeat history. Number two, will not do to others what we do not want others to do to us. We will love for others what we love for ourselves. And this is in the interfaith community, we call it the golden rule of the world's religions, especially the Abrahamic faiths. Number three, will be international law abiding. Nothing wrong with that. Actually, we have big support in the Quran and in the Sunnah for that, if I have something to explain. Number four, will be human rights watching and sensitive. Number five, will apply the Islamic humane values. I'm talking about justice for all, including enemies. I'm talking about that the main goal and theme of Islam is to perfect the good manners. And on us, individual level, family level, society level, and international level. Brothers and sisters, I will conclude with this. I believe we should not leave it to others to identify us. We need to identify ourselves. But in order to do that, we need to move forward to open all kind of files and to have the courage to discuss the modern sensitive issues, not among our intellectual individuals or scholars, but to be the heart and the core of the public and average Muslim individual and family education. In these issues, modern sensitive issues, this is what I think, this is what I believe, this is where we stand. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us all. Thank you very much.